forest fire is a dramatic event. Every year, unplanned, random occurring fires are ignited by lightning or through the careless activity of people. These indiscriminate fires can wildly burn thousands of hectares of forest, threaten communities, and cost millions of dollars to control. We tend to forget that lightning-caused fires are a natural occurring event and are a normal part of many ecosystems. They are nature's way of renewing the forest. Low to moderate intensity surface fires consume diseased and dead trees, along with the duff and ground fuels, making room for regrowth and renewal. Nutrients from this burned material are released and become available for the new forest growth. However, a high-intensity surface fire and crown fire can burn live vegetation as well, consuming all objects in its path. The results of this type of uncontrolled wildfire can be devastating. Occasionally, due to a combination of rare events, people must intervene in a very unique way to prevent a potential catastrophic fire. This particular fire was deliberately set, not by a careless smoker or camper, but by the BC Forest Service and BC Parks. Known as a prescribed fire, this controlled burn was used to prevent a much larger, devastating wildfire. In the late 1980s, a remote area of Tweedsmuir Provincial Park, known as the Chesko River Valley, was the site of a phenomenon known as blowdown, where a combination of high winds and snow knocked down 4,000 hectares of forest. The largest blowdown ever in a BC park, it posed a number of threats both in and outside the park.
We were advised by our partners in this affair, the BC Ministry of Forests, that there was a potential for a catastrophic fire developing if a lightning strike took place there and this enormous volume of wood were to ignite. The catastrophic fire then would have traveled almost 20 miles, actually, outside the east end of the park, destroying in its path valuable winter habitat for caribou. Also, outside, we were very worried about commercial forest values as well. We were concerned about private values represented by a very expensive lodge and some other private developments outside the park. So it was an objective based on that. We were advised that the large volume of blowdown timber was attractive to insects. Bark beetles in particular, and they would use this as a source for developing a very large population, and then they would expand into surrounding standing timber or standing trees from the park's perspective. And possibly this outbreak then that would have occurred had that happened would have extended outside the park as well. So we were concerned about those things.
To summarize, the values at risk from wildfire or insect infestation were risk to wilderness park area, risk to animal habitat, risk to adjacent forest and commercial timber, risk to commercial lodges in the park, and risk to private developments outside the park. Obviously, something had to be done. A way was needed to deal with this blowdown. All alternatives were considered, but BC Parks faced a unique set of problems. Access for ground-based machinery was non-existent. The timber had no commercial value, and the need to protect the Class A park wilderness values paramount.
BC Parks did a lot of research by checking into the various agencies and various conditions that related to this particular remote part of Tweedsmuir Park. And I would like to just point out that this fire location is approximately 50 miles from the nearest settlement in the heart of Tweedsmuir Park. There is a wilderness designation over this portion of the park. The nearest road is at least 30 miles away from here. And so there is no possibility, including logging as one of the methods of removing this blowdown.
The BC Forest Service and BC Parks jointly undertook the project to develop a workable solution. Other provincial and federal agencies were consulted during the research phase.
BC Parks spent considerable time doing research into what was the best way to deal with this. And so we contacted the Forestry Canada Forest Insect and Disease Survey, a very important agency of Forestry Canada, very much concerned with insect attacks. We consulted with the Ministry of Forests. We have consulted with headquarters and district and region of Ministry of Forests. One thing that I think should be brought out here is that we had the chief fire ecologist for the Ministry of Forests from their headquarters in Victoria come up to the site, look it over very carefully, and tell us what he thought was the best way to deal with this unusual situation. So we have been very careful and assiduous in our look at what is the best way to deal with this. And our conclusion was that a preemptive prescribed burn would prevent a catastrophic fire.
To reiterate, there were only 3 alternatives: do nothing and risk catastrophic fire or pest infestation, logging, but logging roads would compromise Class A park values and the timber had no commercial value, or use prescribed fire. The decision to use prescribed fire was not taken lightly. The cost of the operation was estimated at $120,000 to be spread over a 3-year period. BC Forest Service and BC Parks agreed to split the cost of the operation as well as to pool personnel and expertise. An extensive analysis concluded that a prescribed fire would be keeping with the history and fire ecology of the area, since the blowdown stand was itself of fire origin. Minimal soil damage was expected due to its silty texture and coarse fragment content, and the relatively light fuel loading on the ground. In June of 1991, a full-time weather station was set up near the site to monitor conditions, and the following extensive studies undertaken. The areas of blowdown to be burned were identified. The ideal time of year was chosen. Geography and biogeoclimatic zones were studied to determine the burn pattern. The ideal weather was identified. The spread of the ground humidity between the blowdown and surrounding live forest was determined to ensure minimal damage to soil and trees. Early in September, conditions were ideal.
Well, we set up a weather station within about 12 kilometers of the site, and we also put sticks out on the site, a few moisture sticks, and so that gave us a difference between the down material and the blowdown areas and the timber or the treed area. And we had a 4.5 point spread, which is pretty much ideal. So it was wetter under cover, under the trees, than it was out in the open where the blowdown had occurred. Also, the fuel type or the materials on the ground were quite light, particularly in the pine type, so that the fire wouldn't have much opportunity if it went outside the actual blowdown. It would remain on the ground.
A crew of 10 people, 3 helicopters, 2 boats, and support equipment were assembled and a base camp established on the banks of Utsik Lake, about 5 kilometers from the burn site. The day before the burn, senior members of BC Forest Service and BC Parks meet for a final briefing. They review the decision to split the blowdown into 3 distinct areas.
In our initial planning, we were looking at, we had identified these 3 major areas as a concern, and we were looking at Area 1 possibly as Year 1, and Year 2, and Year 3. However, if things go well, that might turn out to be Day 1, Day 2, and 3, so we'll see how well it goes. What we're mainly wanting to do here is take Area 1, we've divided it into 2 parts, 1A and 1B, and start our ignition pattern from about this point, working in a more or less north-south direction. The prevailing winds is certainly a concern, and they generally come from the southwest, so we'll say the prevailing winds are southwest, so it basically follows the valley in that direction. And that's one of the major reasons why we wanted to start in the most easterly portion and work our way back into the winds. This is an observation point. It'll work well for Phase 1 or Area 1. we might have a smoking problem when we get further up the valley that may impact that. So we don't want too many people there.
Just a point in interest here, what we would like to do is try to preserve any of the green standing timber. What we want to do is we want to start off in this corner here, building our column and working it back both from the front and from the sides of the timber in towards the center. And if we do it right, we'll be able to pull all the fire back away from the standing timber and into the center, and it will just stop any major run along that edge. And it should work out really well.
Bob, I gather then that if Section 1A and 1B are complete as planned, this will act like the stopper in the bottle. And
absolutely.
The bottle being the blowdown and the stopper being the burned area that's been achieved
right.
then.
The initial plan is to burn Area 1 over a 2-day period, then return over the next 2 years to complete Areas 2 and 3. To ignite the fire, a special egg ball aerial ignition system had been chosen. A gelled ignition system had been rejected due to the high cost of delivering gelled fuel to the site. Also, the majority of the blowdown was on the ground, and the egg balls would start the fire there, not in the surrounding treetops. The special incendiary egg balls are filled with a chemical that ignites 30 seconds after being dropped from a helicopter. John Rempel from the Ministry of Forests gives a demonstration of how the system works.
And they are put in here. They roll down these chutes in here. The gates are opened and the balls fall into these blocks that slide back and forth. I'll turn the machine on. Okay, as the balls go in here, they're forced against these pins that are in here. The pin pushes a hole into the ball. When the ball pushes this block back, there's a squirt of antifreeze that injects antifreeze into the balls, and then they drop out through here as these balls did. Those didn't get injected, and they fall to the ground and ignite the burn. If there's a problem, I hit a switch which floods the unit and extinguishes any fire. If worst comes to worst, I can always cut the strap and kick the machine out.
Finally, it's time. All the planning that can be done has been done, and the helicopters load up with their incendiary balls and head out to their designated areas. The balls will be dropped in a predetermined pattern according to the burn plan to achieve the desired fire behavior. The results are almost immediate and spectacular. Aboard the light-up helicopter, the burn boss monitors the fire and can modify its behavior utilizing topography, fuel loading, wind, and the drop pattern. He can actually walk the fire in a predetermined direction. Again and again, the helicopters make passes, shaping and moving the fire according to plan. Once the main fire is large enough, sections of the blowdown are stripped off, creating a convection column which pulls the fire toward its center. Throughout the day, the convection column builds spectacularly. BC Forest Service and BC Parks carefully monitor the fire's progress, taking care to stay out of harm's way. As the day progresses, Bill Davidson is pleased at the outcome.
So far, things have gone extremely well. We're getting a convection column that we'd hoped for, and now we're just basically stripping back. We've got it divided up into 3 units, and the first unit is about 3/4 done now.
Everything has gone well the first day. The crews have successfully burned all of the first area, a job that was originally thought might take 2 days. With the risk of unwanted fire eliminated, the decision is made to proceed on to Area 2, the area that was originally scheduled to be burned the following year.
Looks like this section of 2 here is doing the same thing as section 1 did for us. Yes, burned out here in a month.
That's incredible, eh? Can you feel the heat there?
Once again, the fire progresses so well that the orders are given to continue on to the third and final area. In the morning, Forest Service and Parks officials inspect the results of the previous 2 days' burns. As expected, much of the fire has burnt itself out or been reduced to a smoldering stage. While to the layperson the area appears to be devastated, the results are as expected. The massive fire hazard which could have fed a catastrophic wildfire has been eliminated. The prescribed fire has consumed the blowdown with little damage to standing trees and the forest floor. Forest Service and Parks officials are delighted with the results.
This portion of the burn is phase 2. It's about midway down the burn of what we've planned. By burning it in the fall like we've done, we've managed to reduce the impact on the ground and also reduce the impact on the trees themselves in terms of everything burning up. The trees behind us, you'll see the cones are opened up at the top. They're still green. Basically, the needles are still intact on most of them. And the good thing about doing it at this time is we were able to keep all our fire within the boundaries control lines that we wanted and still preserve most of the duff and fine duff on the ground. And if you note in the rotten log here, we've still got some. It's still reasonably wet. It didn't burn. And next year and the year after, this will green right up and look really good. And we'll actually get seedlings coming back in the stand.
Nearly a year has passed since the burn. Forest Service and Parks personnel return to the site to check its regeneration. The results exceed their expectations.
We've got our fireweed coming back. Like we said, it's come in from all over the place, and it's pretty well covering the burn from what we saw. We've got our blowdown has been knocked down to the winter snows, and animal access through here has improved. I've noticed tracks all through the stand. And we've got our tree species coming back. We've got the little pine seedlings coming back, where we've seen willow, cottonwood. We've got some of the woodier material coming back, woody plants like the black twinberry and sopalally. And that's a surprise to us all. And all that had to do with the timing of the burn last year. The conditions were right. We didn't scorch the earth that badly, and everything that was there before just basically has resprouted in terms of the woody material. And it's great animal habitat, and it's excellent. It's worked out really well. We're really pleased with it.
Another purpose of the visit to the site is to set up long-term sample plots in various areas of the blowdown, along with control plots in the nearby untouched forest to study how the forest will regenerate itself in the burned areas.
So therefore, we will put plots, for example, in the lodgepole pine type, which is very dry and usually occupies sandy, well-drained soils. We will observe what comes back there over time. We will put a sample plot in an unburned area so that we can have that comparison, also in lodgepole pine. We will place a further plot in the spruce, heavier conifer forest area, and in the blowdown adjacent to that, and in the burned spruce area. So we will then have a comparison there. We hope to be able to sample some wetter habitats as well as the dry ones that I mentioned to you. So all in all, we'll have a great variety then of forest types coming back and the associated plants that grow with those forest types. The animals that live on these plants and the insects that live on them, and as I mentioned, the fish that will eventually benefit from the fire, we won't be able to measure those things as well. But we will be able to observe animal tracks through that area. We will be able to perhaps count some of these other species. Bird species change with the changing vegetation. Insect species, as I mentioned, change. There's a huge variety of change over time. This is called plant succession, and we will use these plots to observe plant succession.
From all aspects, the Chesko River Valley burn has been a major success. A potential million-dollar wildfire has been averted at a fraction of the cost. Due to meticulous planning, the operation that was originally planned to take place over 3 years was completed in just 2 days. The total operation cost? Just $50,000, less than half the total predicted cost of the project. Prescribed fire use in wilderness areas is an additional component of future fire management plans. The Chesko River Valley burn in Tweedsmuir Provincial Park provides a unique learning experience for both BC Forest Service and BC Park staff. Carrie Joy sums it all up.
We wish to look into the future as well as to the present, and what we've done in the last little while by burning this blowdown is to prepare ourselves for the future. And we're hoping that this will be an example to future generations of parks people, to show that we pioneered something here that can show the way to the future of forest management in parks.